Welcome back to Inside the Paddock. This is episode number 13. Today we are covering the British Grand Prix. A great weekend for McLaren and a pretty solid race all around. And we got some breaking news from AlphaTauri to talk about. So let's get into it. Ricciardo will replace Nick De Vries for second half of the season at AlphaTauri. So, guys, what are your thoughts on this? This is a pretty big shock. I mean, De Vries has been poor this year, but I mean, I don't know if I didn't see this coming.
Neither did I really. I thought that they would give him some more time. It's not even the summer break yet. We still got Hungary coming up weekend after this one. So I'm really shocked, but on the other hand, I'm really excited because I like Ricciardo and I want to see what he can do in the AlphaTauri, given that it is clearly a backmarker car, if not the worst car on the grid. So on that hand, I'm excited, but it is shocking to me. I thought they'd give him at least a few more races, or at least let him finish out the season.
Yeah, I feel like it's a bit premature from Red Bull because it's 10 races in what is probably the worst car on the grid. It's his rookie season. It's De Vries' rookie season. So I don't expect him, no one should expect him to be as good as he could be out of the gates. But with that being said, I'm not really surprised that they replaced him. What I am surprised by is just the timing. I was kind of expecting, him to go at least past Hungary into the summer break, maybe. As you mentioned, Tim, maybe even to the Netherlands. I think it would have been great to see him at the Dutch Grand Prix at his home race before they replaced him. But given the string of performances, I'm not surprised at all that they replaced him. It was just a matter of when, I think, not if, he was going to be replaced. I think Ricciardo is a great choice for AlphaTauri. I think it's probably their best choice at the moment, especially with how bad that car is. His experience at AlphaTauri will help them, build back better. A lot of the junior drivers at AlphaTauri and in the Red Bull program, I think, aren't ready for that seat, especially not for one at AlphaTauri. And I'm excited to see as well Ricciardo. If he performs well, I think he has a shot at that Red Bull seat. Probably not this year because I think Perez is safe. But if Perez continues to struggle and Ricciardo excels in the AlphaTauri seat, maybe he might go into Red Bull, or if a seat opens up at one of those, maybe Aston Martin or something. I don't know. Maybe he takes that seat. So yeah, I think it's premature, but not shocked at all that they eventually made the decision.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It is the halfway point in the season race wise, so I guess there was the understandable time to do it, but I mean, yeah, I agree with you, Kenji. For being in the worst car on the grid, he didn't do good, but I don't think he was really. I don't know. It was. They only have 2 points all season, and clearly Tsunoda's been much better, but it hasn't been Tsunoda's been absolutely going crazy. Especially recently, he's been a little bit worse. And then replacing him with Ricciardo at least is. I think it's good for Ricciardo because if he does perform, he could drive himself into the Red Bull seat if Checo keeps not performing. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of weird. I think they definitely have some good drivers in their program, and they've given it to Ricciardo. It just like I don't know.
Yeah, they do have like Liam Lawson and Iwasa in F2. My biggest concern though is, if De Vries struggled, Nick was a Formula E champion. If that kind of talent is struggling in that AlphaTauri seat, would an F2 driver be able to just come in and, perform well? I'm not saying that, Lawson, all of their junior drivers are bad, but I'm just saying if an FE champion was struggling, how would they perform? And for that reason, I think Ricciardo, who has almost 10 years of experience at this point, both at Red Bull and at McLaren, I think he's probably the best fit for this situation, even though his last season at McLaren wasn't necessarily the best.
Yeah, I mean he's definitely we'll see what he can do. I mean, if he does do well, then it'll certainly be impressive. I definitely get not wanting to put another rookie in there, but yeah, it's a weird scenario in general. I guess I haven't watched the sport when there is a mid-season driver transfer, so it's definitely a new thing. You got anything else?
No, not really. I'm ready to move on to the race.
All right, you want to give us the rundown of the points?
Yeah, so we had Max in P1. Behind him was Lando with the excellent performance, even taking the first position at the start of the race for a little bit. But then behind him was Lewis, which was unfortunate for Oscar Piastri back and forth because Piastri had a pretty solid race, and that third place could have very well been his. But then behind Piastri, we had George Russell, the other Mercedes, and then Perez just outside of the top 5 in the Red Bull car after a very, very weak P15 performance once again. And then we had Alonso in P7 and then Alex Albon in P8, one of the biggest surprises. He was fighting with the Ferraris, The Ferraris just couldn't really deal with him, which was very shocking. So with that being said, the Ferraris were 9th and 10th with Leclerc and Sainz, respectively. And then Logan Sargent was just outside of the points in the other Williams, so he had a pretty solid performance. And then we had 3 DNFs this race in both the Alpines, Ocon and Gasly, and then Kevin Magnussen with, sadly, another poor race performance in P19.
All right. Yeah, it had its high. The race was good at the start, a little dull in the middle, and then after that safety car, it was a pretty solid race. Verstappen, lost the lead at the start. He definitely had something. It was an unusually slow start for him. It didn't look like his reaction was that poor. What do you think about that, Kenji?
I think it was just like a lot of wheel spin. It's like in the F1 game when you rev the engine up to full and then you get a horrible start off the line. I think he just took too many rotations in. And yeah, his reaction time wasn't that much different from Lando's, but it was definitely like the acceleration off the line that kind of affected his start. Yeah. But with that being said, I don't think there was any doubt whatsoever that he would come back and win. Remember we were watching the race, it's like, oh, well, it doesn't matter anyway, Max is going to get past dude. And he did. On lap 5, he overtook Lando. There was this, I think it looked like it was a less comfortable victory for Max, though. He was saying, the car was pulling a bit. GP, his engineer, came over and said it was the wind. He did struggle on the soft tires later on. Do you guys think perhaps McLaren has a shot at challenging Red Bull later in the season, especially if like the wind tunnel penalties come into play or Red Bull shifts their development focus next season?
Frankly, no. I don't think anyone's going to catch Red Bull this season. I don't know. I mean, McLaren, they had a really, really solid couple of races. I hope that they can keep this pace up. But I guess that's sort of been a question with a couple different teams, like, oh, are they going to catch Red Bull or be close to Red Bull? And I just don't think that anyone's going to be able to catch them, like, not only in car performance, but even in the standings even though they have Perez, who's kind of just being a midfield driver most races. I think that they've got a solid advantage on the other teams, at least for this season. I'd be very surprised to see a team like McLaren or Mercedes make a jump and have their car perform alongside Red Bull, at least like close to it.
I don't know.
I think. Sorry, go ahead, Charlie.
I don't know if if they will contend for a race win. I think they could be there to pick up the pieces. I mean, after the safety car, Max didn't really pull more than 3 seconds from Norris, who was on hards. So, like, it wasn't not to say he wasn't, but he definitely was struggling on those tires. And if Lando had softs on, I don't think he would have won, but he might have been able to, at least at the start, kind of challenge him. And who knows, like, but McLaren was content with trying to hold on to P2, which is understandable. It's right now I still think Red Bull and Verstappen are the favorites for every single race, but I think McLaren or even a different team could get a win if the cards fall in their hands.
Do we still think that Max has a chance of winning every single race this season? Because Red Bull have won 20 of the last 21 races, going back to last year as well. Do we think, Max and Checo can win every single race this season, or is it more likely, Charlie, that, McLaren or some other team comes up when Red Bull has an engine explosion or something like that and pick up the pieces?
I don't know. I think we talked about this, and it's just kind of like if Red Bull doesn't have any issues, they're probably going to win. So we kind of need a wild card, either a mechanical issue or just a driver error by Max or Checo, whoever's in first, probably Max. But they have the car to do it. They have the driver to do it. They just have to have all the pieces fall together every single weekend, which is probably not easy to do. It's probably improbable, or it's improbable, but they have the stuff to do it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at last year, Ferrari was not really competitive in the second half, and still Mercedes managed to get a win. I think if you get a similar situation where Max, I think he got kind of taken out in that race at the start, right? Somewhere at Brazil.
It's Brazil, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not out of the race, but like got knocked down the order. Something like that could happen. Maybe even a Singapore type race. I know Perez won it last year, but if he performs poorly and Max also I think he had an engine penalty there maybe, and he couldn't come back through. I know he had a driver error. Then maybe you're looking at a win for someone else there. But I think someone else will get a win. I'm hopeful. But Red Bull have been very impressive this season. They will definitely be the favorites in every single race, I think. All right, moving on. We want to talk about Perez, another disappointing qualifying. Obviously he was the first one to go out on the lap, but he still got beat by Albon, who went right after him. So it's still unacceptable. He just needs to get it together. I want to see him kind of up there, because him versus Max in the race could be the only interesting part for battle for a lead that could happen right now, and he just can't put it together on Saturday.
I don't know. Five races in a row not in Q3 is just shocking for being in a car like that. He's really just putting himself in a spot to lose the seat, I feel like, if this keeps going. Like, I just don't see how they could keep him if he's not pulling together at least, like, a top 5 performance like this week with nothing really, like, visibly wrong other than the fact that he qualified poorly. Like, they're giving him the car to do it, and he's just kind of, I don't know what it is, lack of confidence, lack of something, but he's just not doing well.
I mean, at least his race pace is good. I think on like German TV, there's a quote from Marco where he kind of made a, like, let's put it this way: he didn't put Nick de Vries in the nicest terms possible. He said, at least he does well in the race, like Nick de Vries, classic Marco. But yeah, it seems like it's just a confidence issue, and we kind of spoke about this previously as well, going back to Monaco, that crash he had in qualifying. And especially, I think, back to Miami, where he was hyped up to be, a championship contender. He was hyped to be on the same level as Max was. And I think, seeing Max go from like 10 to all the way back to win the race kind of wrecked his confidence. And I think he hasn't been able to get it back since then. Yeah, as Charlie mentioned, I don't think the fact that he went out first is any excuse, because I think by the end of the season, at least, he will have driven in statistically the most dominant car ever in the sport, if Red Bull continued the way they have been. And given that car, it is unacceptable for you to be struggling to get out of Q2. And everyone else, it's not like Checo was the only one being affected by the evolution on track. I mean, everyone else, all the other drivers are being affected by that same kind of conditions, as Terry mentioned with Albon. So, yeah, I think he just needs to sort out qualifying, as we mentioned last time. And once he does that, he'll be able to put in some better race performances.
All right. We're going to move on to the surprise of the weekend. McLaren with a really incredible weekend. I mean, second and third in qualifying for Lando, and then Piastri. Second place in the race for Lando. Fourth place for Piastri, who got unlucky with the safety car, kind of handed it to Hamilton. I mean, it was a great weekend. Norris held the lead at his home race. The crowd reaction was crazy off the line. And I don't know, y'all want to talk about this? Y'all got anything to say about McLaren, or we can go into their strategy decision, get some opinions on that.
I was watching qualifying, and I thought for a couple of seconds that Lando had a genuine shot at pole, because, he went on the provisional pole, and the crowd went crazy. And I was looking at Max's times, and I think he went yellow in the middle sector, and he was down like 1 or 2 tenths on the lap. So I thought Lando had actually taken pole, but obviously, in Lando's words, Max just came in and ruined everything. And even during the race, when Lando jumped Max off the line, I didn't think he had a good shot to win, but after seeing him pole a second, I think he got out of DRS for a couple corners, and I kind of thought he had a shot, but obviously it didn't pan out. But yeah, it's a stunning jump from McLaren, and even Piastri, who is a rookie, I think he's probably one of my drives of the weekend. I think he had a very underrated drive from fourth. Yeah, so it's a very big jump, a very impressive jump from McLaren, and yeah, I'm excited to see how they perform in the future.
Yeah, I mean, just to have another team in that kind of it's not really a three-way fight, but 3 teams contending for those places behind Red Bull, and now to have a fourth team is making that race really exciting. Yeah, I mean, just incredible jump. Piastri didn't even have all the upgrades again, and still probably should have got a podium. Yeah, he had a really good race. He's normally been making a couple mistakes here and there in the race, which is okay because he's a rookie, like in Canada, I think, where he had good pace but just made a couple mistakes. And he didn't really make any mistakes in this race. It was just the safety car, so it happens. But it was an interesting move by McLaren to put on both their drivers on the hard tires when they had a Mercedes behind them on mediums and a Mercedes behind them on softs, and then Max in front of Norris on softs. And I mean, we were watching the race and we thought they were sitting ducks basically. We were trying to understand it. We couldn't really understand it. Do y'all think that was the hindsight? That was a good decision, or was it still they should have gone on softs?
I don't know. Whenever I watched it, I still was like, I didn't think it was a good idea, and I don't exactly understand why they did it. But now, or I mean, they didn't get past. They were still P2 and 4, but Ferrari did like a very similar thing too, where they went to the hard tires and they couldn't do anything either, even with a Williams ahead of them, which I feel like they probably should have passed. Maybe the Williams just had better pace. I mean, I think they probably did. But still, they just didn't really put up a fight. So I don't know what it was. I think whatever they were thinking, they made the right decision. But I don't know. What are your thoughts, Kenji?
Yeah, I still think the move to softs was the right decision at that time. If Hamilton jumps Norris into Copse or into the first turn, I think we're talking a lot differently. I think the tone of this conversation is a lot different. And I think he had a genuine shot too, that is. Yes, the hards did show, or the softs did show more degradation than we expected in those 14 laps. But I think just the initial advantage from the softs gives the softs the position of being like the better tire in that moment, even though, like I said, the hards were longer lasting. I think it's a bit different from Ferrari. I don't think it's the right move to compare McLaren's strategy to Ferrari. Ferrari's strategy just, quite frankly, didn't really make a lot of sense. You know, going on the mediums for like 20 laps and then pitting to the hards, and then I don't really understand their strategy at all. And I think there were no, I guess, reasons for them to do that, as made evident by their finish in ninth and 10th. At least with McLaren, there was, I guess, the fear, I think that Zach Brown even mentioned during the race, that the softs wouldn't perform as well. That is, like, they'd fall off the curb as we approach the end of the race. And I think we've kind of saw that with Max and Lewis struggling towards the end of the race. So yeah, I think the softs were still the best move, but I think in hindsight, the hards kind of redeemed themselves as well.
Yeah. Moving on, we can go down to Mercedes. You know, we talked about McLaren, but on the other side, we had Mercedes. And I feel like Lewis sort of got, just the cards were played in his favor. He got pretty lucky. You know, I don't know if he was gifted that P3. He could have still gotten it ahead of Piastri. I mean, we don't know what could have happened, but it was a much easier P3 than it could have been. So what are y'all's thoughts on that? Because personally, I would have loved to see a McLaren double podium, but I can't really say that it would have happened even if Hamilton hadn't have been gifted the P3. But it is unfortunate still for McLaren. You know, just Hamilton got the better look.
Yeah, I mean, Hamilton, he had a good drive. I think Piastri certainly deserved to be in third place when that safety car restarted. I have no idea if he would have been able to defend like Lando did, because it was a really great job by Lando to hold off Lewis those first 2 or 3 laps. And just given that Piastri is a rookie, I don't know if he would have been able to hold off Lewis like that. But, I mean, it's still a good result for Piastri. It's only 3 less points than what Hamilton got. It's, yeah. Mercedes it was kind of a weird weekend for them. They benefited from Ferrari's incompetence and then the safety car. So they still seem to struggle for pace and seem to not really be anywhere near McLaren. I mean, you heard Russell on the radio saying how shocked he was that McLaren had this type of pace on the hards. And then Hamilton, after like 5 laps, wasn't within DRS of Lando. So I don't know. Do we think that McLaren is truly that ahead of Mercedes now, or was it a track specific thing?
I don't think they made a jump that big, but they definitely made a jump.
I think we said this last race too, and I don't want to say it again, but I think it's still a bit early to tell. We know that McLaren does well on tracks with high-speed corners. Australia was one of those tracks, and I think Silverstone is also another one of those where you have a bunch of high-speed corners, Magnus and Beckett's and everything like that. So McLaren does tend to do well on those tracks, which gives credence towards it being more like track specific. And I'm just excited to see, can they keep that pace up when we go into Hungary and Spa? Those are the 2 main tracks I'm looking at, because Hungary, they call it like, Monaco without the walls because of how many corners it has, how tight the track is. And it's typically a more like aero focused track. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. If McLaren performs well, in Hungary especially, and in Spa, that's when I would be, getting excited. It's not that I'm not excited at all right now, but I still think it could still be a bit more like track specific. But even then, in my wildest dreams, I didn't expect, Lando to be second and, Piastri to be qualifying third. That was just a massive shock. Even if McLaren overperformed, I didn't think they would overperform this much. And I do think like Piastri had a shot at the podium without the safety car, because we saw even like at the start of the race, he was pulling away from the Ferraris and the Mercedes. So I think if Hamilton doesn't benefit from that safety car, if there is no safety car, I think Piastri is on that podium.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to see if McLaren can continue to be in that fight with Mercedes, Ferrari, Aston Martin. That's what I'm looking forward to the rest of the season. And then seeing if one of them can take that step to Red Bull. Aston Martin, I don't know, their car, it seems like they've kind of stopped development almost. Like, it's really good at some tracks. It's not good at others. Alonso's, I'm going to be on the podium every race from here on out. Didn't age well. Do y'all think they're falling back, or will they be back soon?
I think that Mercedes just overtook them in car performance. I mean, I don't think there's too much doubt about that. They've had much better weekends, at least the past few race weekends. I just think that Mercedes just passed them, and I don't know. I'm not exactly like concerned about Aston Martin, because I'm still surprised that they were so good at the start of the season. And I think that like where they were this weekend was what I expected them to be this year. So I'm not exactly concerned, but I think that they've definitely fallen back or been overtaken in car performance by at least Mercedes right now.
I think it's a variety of factors. I think one of those is, as you mentioned, Tim, the jump that Mercedes had made sort of this season. And I think that was kind of the fear we had, you know, from the past couple of years, you know, from historical precedent. We've seen Mercedes start like pretty bad, but as the season, I guess, continues, they kind of develop that car to be more competitive. And I think that's kind of the trend this year as well. Would have just overtaken Aston in the development race. But I think also something that has to be considered is just, you know, McLaren's overperforming. And before McLaren brought those upgrades, they were behind Aston. And so now that they're just overperforming by these, you know, huge margins, it's kind of making Aston look a bit worse than they probably should. And of course, I think Stroll is just kind of a disappointment, to be frank. His qualifying's kind of like Checo's. I think he was 8th actually in the qualifying, but he fell to 14th. So really weird. I don't remember exactly where that happened, but yeah, I think it's just a variety of factors that are combining almost to make a perfect storm, such that Aston Martin looks horrible. But yeah, I think Mercedes is definitely ahead of them at the moment.
Yeah, I think another team we can sort of move on to that had a poor race weekend was Ferrari. I feel like I remember saying last week that I needed one more weekend to see if they're for real. And they gave us one more weekend and they are not for real. Like, they're just kind of not. It's not any different. They're their classic self. You know, they had a couple pretty good weekends, and then they just had one weekend where they were getting passed by Albon, and they could not compete with the Williams. I don't know. Should we be concerned, or to what extent should we be concerned with them?
I think.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Charlie.
No, you go.
I think the problem is just their strategy department. Their qualifying pace was good. I would say the practice pace was good as well. I think they're 4th and 5th in qualifying. And I thought, you know, they weren't at the same level as McLaren, but, you know, McLaren was holding back Russell, who was on the softs for a large portion of the early stint. And to be frank, I don't understand why they put Leclerc or on the hards so early on, because he's starting on the mediums. You would think that he'd be able to run further into the race. And I think Leclerc even said it in his press conference as well. He said, you know, the medium stint was good. I don't understand why we pitted so early, but I don't have the full picture of that, you know, to quote him on that in verbatim. It's just another really weird weekend from their strategy department. And to be honest, I think that's kind of what screwed them up this weekend. Just their strategy was horrible and just doomed them to where they were at the end of the race.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Like, pitting Leclerc. I mean, Russell did like almost 7 or 8 more laps than him on softs. So there's no reason to pit Leclerc. And when they did, they just pit him into traffic for no reason. And then Sainz was out there on old hards after the restart. And, well, I mean, we saw him lose, like 4 positions in one lap. I mean, it's just it's classic Ferrari, and there's nothing else to say. It's it doesn't make any sense. Even without the safety car, it still wouldn't have been a very good strategy, I don't think. It's weird.
Anything else about Ferrari? Just not their week. So
they have the pace, but it's just strategy needs fixing. I don't blame them for getting overtaken by Williams because, you know, Albon was very good this weekend. We'll get on to him later, but if the strategy department, like I keep saying, just didn't screw him, he wouldn't even have been in that position to be fighting with the Williams. So, yeah, that's all I have to say. I think they had the pace, but strategy was just bad.
Yeah, I guess an even worse weekend with the Alpine. No, they didn't even finish. That's just not really. I don't know, just not a good finish. Both of them were out. It was sad. They also were passed up by McLaren, which is not surprising. I think that even if they had a good weekend, it would happen eventually. But yeah, it's just kind of just a bad weekend overall.
They got a. I don't think I'm not gonna say they're out of it for 5th place because I thought McLaren was out of it, but they got to do something quick because they're gonna lose a lot of points. It took McLaren 2 weekends basically to bridge Alpine's biggest gap. They have pretty good drivers. Yeah, they need to get it together. Bring some upgrades.
Yeah, with how tight that midfield is, isn't the gap between McLaren and Alpine 12 points now or something like that? 12, 13 points.
Yeah,
and
something like that.
Yeah, and even if they finish 8th, you're only getting 4 points. If you finish 9th, 2, 10th, 1. So it's just because Alpine have disappointed throughout the season. I feel that they're in this position right now. But given how close that midfield is, yeah, it'll just be extremely challenging to get the points consistently enough to challenge McLaren. So, yeah, they needed a bounce back, like we said in the preview. They didn't get it. And here we are. McLaren is ahead of them now. So, yeah, just a huge disappointment from Alpine, who we said were the underdogs for this season. And to this point, they haven't shown that. I do think Ocon said that they would be bringing more upgrades into Hungary. So that is something to watch. But at this point, I don't really have hope. I still think they have a chance at 5th, though. But I think it's definitely pretty slim.
Yeah, that's fair. We've been talking about teams doing bad for the past little while, but there was a team that kind of had a really good weekend overall in not only the race but even in practice and quali. The Williams, with Albon getting a P8 finish ahead of the Ferrari, and then Sargent getting a P11 finish right behind the Ferrari. So this is really exciting. I think that all three of us can say that we were sort of cheering for Williams. They have an American driver. You really like Albon, Kenji. So I'm really happy with this. They made a huge performance jump, a really big one, from fighting at the bottom, or Albon maybe getting a P10 every once in a while, to almost getting in the double points is really massive for them. And hopefully it's something that we can be excited for in the future.
I'm especially looking forward to those European tracks of the straights, Spa or Italy. I think they will be very scary in Monza, especially given the nature of their car, where it's pretty slippery, but it does extremely well on tracks of straights or with long straights and high-speed corners. So, yeah, I think they could be really, really scary later on in the season. And I'm just excited to see them being competitive again, because for the past couple of years, especially since 2018 and 2019, they've just been horrible. And I hope this is just the start to something good with Williams, because we definitely want to see them competitive again, it's the 90s again. So I don't know if they're going to make it that far, but yeah, definitely a great result for them and a great result for the championship as well.
Yeah, if Sargent can find some more form, get more accustomed to the sport in general, you could be looking at some competition with the Alpine, even if they don't make steps forward these next few races. So, yeah, good to see Williams back. excited to see what they can do the rest of this. Like you said, can do the European tracks. You got some long straights with Belgium and Monza. So, yeah. Other teams, we got the other guys. Alfa Romeo. They're a weird team. I don't even know. Like, I feel like they're the most forgettable just because they don't really do anything. They're not bad. They're probably better than Haas and AlphaTauri in terms of race pace, but
They're not good enough to get into the points.
yeah, I mean, wait, what does Bottas DQ went to P12 mean? Did he DQ?
Yeah, he DQ'd in qualifying.
Oh,
He
okay,
had the fuel sample problem where he didn't have enough fuel in his car, so he started 20th and then he went to
okay.
finish 12th in the race.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, still a pretty solid result. I don't know.
Yeah, good recovery drive. He was helped a bit by everyone retiring, sure, but I think still gaining 8 places in the Alfa Romeo, which is quite frankly one of the worst cars on the grid, perhaps with AlphaTauri and Haas. I think it's still a good result. It's regrettable that they got disqualified because I think with the pace Bottas had, he could have been 11th, probably not 10th, but yeah, I think he could have gotten some better results. But yeah, still a decent weekend for Alfa Romeo.
Yeah, I guess not a decent weekend for AlphaTauri again. It was De Vries' last weekend. We didn't know that, but he still finished last out of the finishing drivers. So, right before he left, he gave us another last place performance. And then Tsunoda, didn't really do anything. And then same with Hülkenberg and the Haas. I don't really feel like I remember him doing anything, but then his teammate kind of he caused the safety car. His engine blew out. He got stopped on the side of the road, which kind of gave us at least some excitement in the race. I don't remember where he was running, but I'm sure it wasn't that high.
Yeah, no, I remember Hulkenberg, he kind of turned in on Perez as Perez passed him, and that kind of ruined whatever mid-table result he was going to get. Magnussen continues to either be disappointing or unlucky this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a problem where they don't have pace in the race. We've seen they're pretty good in qualifying. I forget where they were in Britain's qualifying, but just another problem of being off the pace, kind of without AlphaTauri and stuff. Yeah, nothing more to add on them.
All right, guys, I gotta get the car back to Coleman. I know I didn't do anything in the predictions, so gain your points. Try and mountain comeback, but it will not be. It will be
right.
negligible. I'll see you guys
All
next
right, well,
time.
it's good seeing you, Charlie. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We can move on to the games.
You want to review the prediction results
Oh,
first?
yeah, for sure. So we had let's see, 1 second. Gotta get in the middle. So we had Charlie. He didn't do anything. He had Checo winning, which was not good. He didn't even get in the top 5. But then we both had Max winning, so we got that right. I don't think we really got anything else right. You had Albon in the sneaky point finisher, so at least that was correct. But then I had Lewis, Fernando, George, Carlos. That didn't work out. Charlie had Max, Charles, Fernando, and then Lando in P5. That didn't work out. And then you had Checo, Carlos, Lewis, and Fernando. So you almost got Lewis, but he got the podium spot instead of Oscar. So not really much happening. We gained a little bit on Charlie. He's sitting at 26 points. You're sitting at 14. I'm sitting at a meager 9. So.
Yeah, I think it was just a problem of McLaren overperforming, to be frank. Even Charlie, who had Lando for fifth, I would say he probably didn't expect McLaren to be challenging for a double podium. And yeah, we didn't expect it as well. So obviously the results were affected by that. And we didn't gain as much as we had hoped to. But still hopeful for the future. I think I can take the fight to Charlie. And I think you definitely can too as well, Tim, especially with how long the season is. So yeah, we'll just have to see.
Just need a couple good performances in the predictions. All right. Well, I think that just about wraps up our episode. Thank y'all for watching or listening. And we will see you next week with the Hungary Grand Prix preview. We'll see. We'll bring these games back, talk about our predictions and the past Hungary Grand Prix and how we are looking forward to the Hungary Grand Prix this next weekend, especially with Ricciardo coming in and it's his first race of the season. We'll see how he does. So anyway, thank y'all for listening and we'll see you next week.